Hello and welcome back to the Uncovery Podcast. My name is Maddie and I'm recovering from anorexia and I talk about it on this podcast. And this will be the second round of sort of this trial of doing the video and the audio at the same time. So like we're practicing so that when we fully launch YouTube and everything in season 3, we will have at least gotten used to staring at our own face a little bit more, although I do not know that will ever feel very normal. Okay, we're just going to kind of talk about a few different things today. It's a bit of a summer ramble. There's been a few things that have been going on that I thought I would mention. And one of them has to do with sort of this idea of balance and working towards things and what are the things that we want out of life and whether or not they make us happy and that kind of stuff that's been going on for me. But a few like imminent pieces of news from eating disorder recovery land. One is that I got the opportunity to be a guest in the group therapy group that I used to attend. So I think I've mentioned it in a past episode that several months ago when the groups were starting up again, my therapist basically said, don't join. You don't need to be in group therapy anymore as a participant. Because I had really reached this point where my recovery was in a different place than perhaps was necessary for me to be participating in that kind of group. I was in the same group with some of the people, and so I've been in need of group therapy within the last year. But the way that my recovery has been going, it just didn't really continue to make sense for me to be there and to be some kind of like resident group participant cheerleader that didn't really need it necessarily for my own recovery anymore. But Lakshmi asked me a few weeks ago if I would go and be a group therapy guest. And it feels like maybe it's a small thing, but to me, it's a bit monumental just because I've been going to those groups since like 2016, on and off, obviously. But to go back and to try and instill some sense of optimism or at least hope, and to also give a very real account of how difficult certain parts of recovery are and certain portions of time that you're in recovery, how difficult those can be. So to get to do that, coming from where I have come from, felt like a huge deal. And it's like you don't know when you've arrived in recovery. And there will be mixed opinions about whether or not you ever do, but there's a series of clicking moments that turn over as you get closer and closer to like really just fully stepping through the threshold into being a normal person in the world. And this feels like one of them. So I did want to share that I went and I loved talking to them. It felt a lot like this conversation, but with feedback in real time and getting to talk to people. And I think the vision that I have beyond the podcast so far and like what my intention is for growing it and having more reach to more people in the world about things that are eating disorders, but that are also not. It all like really feels like it's starting to come together, this vision that I have for the power of storytelling, the power of people's experiences and being able to step into them vulnerably, share them if you feel comfortable, and what that can do for other people and the belief in themselves that they can do it too. So anyways, that is a moment. And so I wanted to share it. On the other hand, I also saw an online trend where people are, in weight loss spaces and diety spaces, which we don't like being in, but sometimes trends online just filter into your feed no matter what. People are dipping everything in mustard and calling it a meal. And they also think that it's revolutionary. And anybody that has been part of the eating disorder world or has had an eating disorder or has even been diet culture before it was cool. We've been using mustard out here for a long time because it has like no calories and whatever. And people are genuinely blending up cottage cheese and mustard and being like, this is revolutionary. It tastes like queso with straight faces. And like, there's nothing further from reality than like the delusion of I'm going to make something that doesn't taste like something taste like something that it's not. It just isn't true. And whatever you need to do to sleep at night, fine, go off. Like I'm libertarian in that way. But like mustard will never taste like queso. And that's a hill that I will die on. I don't love seeing that kind of thing is praised when actually that kind of mindset and using those tools and then recommending them to other people is something that has been very prominent in pro anorexia and pro eating disorder online spaces. It's really toxic and unhelpful to be recommending these things to basically starve your body and replace real food with things that like just don't have calories. So I also can't say that I've tried blending up cottage cheese and mustard. That I will say. I never reached for that. And as much as a part of me is like, okay, maybe there's a reason that people are saying that it's as delicious as they're saying it is. I think for my own sanity, I will probably just not try that ever. It sounds awful, but it also sounds like it would be awful for anybody that has ever had an eating disorder to be like, oh, how tempting. So we're just going to stay out of that, especially since we are having a fed girl summer. And I want to talk a little bit about summer just because we're flying through it already. I don't know what happened to June, not sure. And now we're going to be like halfway into July shortly. Summer is an extremely... Again, I hesitate to use this word because it grinds my gears, but it can be a very triggering time for people that have eating disorders or have had eating disorders or have body struggles or food struggles or a myriad of different things. For a bunch of different reasons. There's a lot more flexibility, I think, in schedules in the summer. There's a lot less predictability. There's more vacations, which from other episodes, you'll know all of the havoc mentally that vacations can bring. But it also has a lot to do with like bodies in summer clothes and bathing suit season and things like that. And what I will say about this is that it can be two things that are true at once. You can feel very uncomfortable with the prospect of summer clothes because you have to stay cool to some degree, right? You have to stop wearing sweaters and stop wearing long pants. And if you're in recovery for a lot of the sort of weight gain period or the weight stabilization period or the normalizing of eating period, the best and cardinal rule is wear what's comfortable, period. End of sentence. Wear what's comfortable, wear what you feel good in, and that's it. And no matter what that is and for how long that takes, just do that. But you also at some point probably want to be wearing normal clothes that you think are cute, clothes that you think that are nice, clothes that are then also weather appropriate without having all the anxiety that comes along with it around what does this look like on whatever part of my body that I, still have an issue with. So it can be that you want to keep yourself as comfortable as possible, especially if you're in a period of recovery that you're kind of like white knuckling, like grinding through. It's difficult. But as you sort of start to come along, the resilience that you need to build to normalize your life is going to mean wearing clothes and wearing a more variety of clothes. And I'm not saying that we need to force ourselves to wear clothes that are very uncomfortable, but things that we can work our way into to get more comfortable with. You can do this one of two ways. You can either do this bit by bit in a similar way that we think about food when we think about eating disorder recovery. You can either, sort of push your boundary just little bit by little bit by little bit. Just wear the shorts and then like long sleeve, or wear a cover up over your bathing suit for a while until you're comfortable taking the cover up off, whatever it is, bit by bit. Or you can just really dive in and be like, you know what? Nobody is thinking about my body. Nobody's thinking about my body except for me. And certainly if they're even looking at my body, they're not thinking about it in the same way that I am, or as much as I am, because they have their own stuff going on. So I'm going to wear the bathing suit. And maybe I will hate it, and maybe it will feel torturous to do it the first time. But in the same way that we think about sort of like exposure therapy to some of our greatest fears and the way that that works its way into our recovery on an ongoing basis, it's a faster way to get there, in my opinion, rather than chipping away at things, which I've done, right? In a lot of different ways in my recovery. I think with the food piece for me, it really was this like step-by-step, very, very gradual thing. And for a while, exercise was that too. It was this very like gradual chipping away thing until I fractured my spine, had no choice. And then it was like, you're incredibly uncomfortable, but we're going to get through this faster this way. I think with clothes, and with summer clothes specifically, if you can dive in, no pun intended, to like just wearing the bathing suit and realizing that nothing bad happens, we may get there a little bit faster in terms of our level of comfort. But I do understand and still experience this like summer clothes come out, and especially if you've been in recovery, it may be summer clothes that you had stored away, you brought them back out, and perhaps they're not going to fit anymore. Do not try them on. I've said this before about other clothes. Do not try them on. If you have even an inkling that they are not going to fit, like why put yourself through the torture? Just get rid of them. Get summer clothes that fit. But some of those are going to still reveal parts of your body that you're not going to be comfortable with. And so I'm with you. And so if that's been your experience, especially because it's, oh my God, so hot. I mean, obviously there are people that listen to this podcast that are in other parts of the world, but hot. Got AC, thank God. Because it would be a very sweaty girl summer if not for a little bit of air conditioning. That's worth the investment. Okay. Summer bodies, all bodies are summer bodies, all bodies are bikini bodies. Nobody's thinking about it as much as you are, I promise. But do what's within, your tolerance level if you must. I've been thinking a lot about balance, especially in summer when there are different priorities. There are a lot more fun things that are on your plate that you could possibly be doing. And I've also been having some very exciting work stuff happening in the last month. But I had this experience where leading up to a trip that I was taking to do a very cool talk at a conference in Thailand, which sounds extremely cool and is something that I have been, dreaming about doing, and that I love that my career has taken me to this place, that everything I've ever wanted kind of professionally is like right within my grasp and is sort of happening in real time. That was what drove me through recovery in a lot of ways that wouldn't have been available to me a year ago mentally for me. It just wasn't, I wasn't comfortable. I wasn't comfortable traveling. I just couldn't have done it where I was. And so to have it be happening is incredibly exciting and rewarding. And I feel honored to do it. And in the lead up, I was dreading it. I was finding myself just feeling exhausted before it was even happening. Just mentally being like, I don't know. Oh shoot. It's fine. Just dropped that. But wishing that it wasn't happening for some reason, or wishing that it was getting postponed, or not wanting to do it. And what I've been thinking about as a result is there are things that we want, that we are striving towards. And I think that it may be that the human condition is to strive, that we need to be working towards something to find a feeling of purpose in what we're doing. Because otherwise we're sort of just floating around aimless, untethered, not aimed at anything. And that it doesn't work well. It doesn't ground us in anything. I think it leaves us feeling quite lost when we're there. So I think the human condition might be to strive towards something that brings us a feeling of purpose. But what I've been thinking about is that the idea of what brings us purpose and what actually brings us purpose might not be the same thing. So how much of me wanting to do these things that I do in my career are because I truly, genuinely feel purposeful in doing them? And how much, if any, is a little bit of an ego play of I want to be the type of person that does this type of thing and then can say that I have accomplished these types of things? Because those are very different. Feeling like an inherent intrinsic motivation is very different than I want to be the kind of person, or I want to prove to myself that I could do this. Because that feels like a little jolt of enoughness, a little jolt of you can do this. You became the person that can do it. It's been offered to you. It's in your hands. You've done it. And that sense might actually supersede the intrinsic motivation that we have to have done these things in the first place. So that's all to say that I think when people are successful and we look at them and I don't know if we envy or are in awe of or respect the things that they're doing, that it's entirely possible that those people are like, do I even like this? Do I even love this? Do I even want to be here? And this dedication to being honest with yourself about the things that light you up versus the things that you think you ought to be doing and the reasons for which you find yourself doing things. I just think it's an important reflection to take sometimes. I also think that maybe it doesn't matter if it's both of those things. Maybe it doesn't matter if a little bit of the reason that we strive towards things is so that we feel like we could get them. Because maybe that's driving us, and maybe that's enough for the world to like come up with great things and to have people do great things, that intrinsic motivation doesn't always precede greatness or progress. That perhaps progress precedes intrinsic motivation and then acceleration from there. I don't know. These are the things that have been bopping around my head, is how we actually kind of feel fulfilled and our purpose and what that means for how well we feel. Because if striving at these things is then at a cost to our mental or physical health, then that's not great. That's not a great trade-off. And at the same time, it's okay to be out of balance for certain periods of time. And this is something that I talked about in therapy several weeks ago with my therapist, which was I'm feeling like on the edge of overwhelm. I'm feeling like there's a lot going on for me right now and that I'm not enjoying any of it as much because I'm feeling a little bit just like at my edge of capacity. And for me, what always comes to mind now is there a risk of slippage in my recovery when I feel overwhelmed? Because that was always my tool for when I was overwhelmed. That was always what I went to and could rely on when the rest of everything felt a little bit out of control, a little bit too intense. So my fear is always that when I get into this sort of like boss mode of like, I just need to work through things and there's just stuff coming up and meditation be damned and journaling isn't happening and the wellness and self-care bits of my life they're just not at the top of the list right now. And they just can't be right now. Does that mean that I'm going to be failing at recovery? Does that mean that I'm out of balance? Am I doing this life thing wrong? Do I always have to be at this perfect middle ground of the pendulum between taking care of myself and doing things in the world, taking care of myself and doing things in the world? And Lakshmi said, no, you can be in periods of imbalance. She's like, you're not going to be in balance all the time. She's like, there's a finite period of time that you're working through some like big work stuff right now. And so if you need to go boss mode for a while, do it. It's fine. Your recovery will not suffer. Keep track, right? Like keep track of what's going on with you throughout that process. But it doesn't have to be this perfect #balance, #wellness, #self-care all the time. You can reverberate a little bit further from that middle ground and still keep yourself well and not beat yourself up about being out of balance. So I don't know if that would be helpful to anybody else, because it was really helpful to me. It felt like permission to be like, okay, I just got to grind, and maybe I'll be a little bit less in my body. Maybe I'll be a little bit less in my feelings. Maybe I'll be a little less connected to myself for this period of time. And maybe that's fine. Maybe that's fine for now. Maybe we're just getting through and we're a human doing for a little while instead of a human being. So I hope that perhaps that is helpful to somebody else. And that if you feel like you're distracting yourself or dissociating on purpose to kind of release your mind from all of the stuff that's going on with you, I don't know, just know that you're not alone. I'm like, why am I scrolling through reels? Why am I putting off sleep when I know I have to get up and work? Like, why am I self-sabotaging? And it's this feeling that I think it's this paralyzing feeling of there's a million things that I want and need to be doing, and I can't decide where to put my focus right now. So Instagram Reels seems like a good place to be doing that right now. That seems to be what the underlying narrative within me is doing. I didn't have really a giant thesis for this episode other than to say that balance is not necessary at all times, that there's some stuff going on in the eating disorder space, both for me personally and, the eating disorder space at large, that have been topical. And this little nugget that I wanted to share that I heard as we conclude is the difference between hope and optimism. And I heard someone on a podcast talking about this, and the interviewer was basically saying, it sounds like you're optimistic. And he said, no, I'm not optimistic, but I have hope. And in that moment, I was like, what is the difference between those two things? And they didn't really ask this person on the podcast to define what he meant by that. But for me, what I kind of came to in thinking about it was that optimism is when you think that the probability of a good outcome is like greater than 50%. That it's like probably going to happen. Like, I'm optimistic. I think it's more likely than not that this is going to be the outcome. Whereas hope is just a probability greater than 0 that something positive can happen. It's still maybe more likely than not that something good won't happen, but hope is just anything greater than 0, because beyond that, then there's just nothing. There's no possibility that you can see of a positive outcome. And so if you're in recovery, or you're going through something, or you're working at something, and you feel like you are losing hope, perhaps you are not losing hope. Perhaps you are just losing the level of optimism. But as long as there's always a greater than 0 chance of something wonderful happening, which I know is hard to imagine when you're really in the weeds, then you still have hope. And that was something that I'm like, I'm gonna keep this little nugget. Anything greater than 0, there's still hope. So, all right. Have a wonderful week. If you're in the wonderful land of Calgary Cowboys, I hope you're enjoying your stampede. I don't know how many people are going to listen to this episode in Calgary, because y'all are just out at tents. Look at I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I've got my boots on. For anybody that was just listening, I was just showing the video camera, my cowboy boots. It's a marathon, not a sprint. But guess what? Recovery means you get to go and eat mini donuts. I had wonderful mini donuts at a party the other night. I intend to get some more. You can go out and not have to think about food the whole time you're out. You can go out and not have to count the calories that are in the drinks that you're having. You can go out having eaten before you're drinking, which is sensible and necessary for your body to maintain its equilibrium. You're not just absolutely spent and exhausted trying to struggle your way through these like overly people-y social scenarios with an already high level of anxiety because you're underfed. Like, life is genuinely, whether you like Stampede or carnivals or anything like that at all, whether or not that even speaks to you, the ability to do things in the real world with people that you care about and that care about you, and to have fun experiences and to not have to think about all of the eating disorder stuff that you've been carrying around. I cannot possibly explain how free that feels, to just go out into the world and be like, I'll figure it out as I go. There was no planning. There was no stress that needed to be involved here. It's great. It's great. Stampede is a nice little recovery marker of being like, eating disorders hate Stampede. they're an eating disorders nightmare. And that means that through recovery, getting there is a big deal. So, all right. That's enough for this episode. We will see you on the next one.